Hello, I'm Alison Clarkson. I'm one of your 3 state senators representing the Windsor district, and I am honored to serve the Windsor district as in the state legislature as the Vice Chair of Senate Economic Development and the Clerk of Government Operations. I also serve you on the Women's Caucus, on the Climate Solutions Caucus, and on a committee called Judicial Rules. Vermonters' lives and livelihoods have been turned upside down by the COVID crisis. All of us, are so impressed by the resilience and courage and generosity of Vermonters as we confront this challenge together. And the legislature, we've been working very hard in this historic session to address some of the financial disruption that people and businesses have faced, and to help lives continue to function in a productive capacity. Helping Vermonters weather this crisis has really been our top priority since we turned and pivoted to this work in mid-March. It's a stark reminder that at its best, state government expresses our care for each other and enables the public good.
So I'm Alice Nitka, one of your senators from Ludlow, and the 3 of us have been working together on a number of issues. We each serve on committees that were key in addressing issues with regard to the pandemic. I mean, there are others as well, but I'm on the Vice Chair of Appropriations for the money, and also the Vice Chair of Judiciary, and there has been an issue there, of course, with police and the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as justice reinvestment. So we've been working on that. I'm also the chair of judicial retention. So, and we all are involved in all of the work that goes on in all of the committees, but those are the ones that we focused on, and we've worked closely together because of the interactions of those committees with each other. So we'll be hearing more.
Hi, I'm Dick McCormack. We're unmasked because we're 6 feet apart. And I serve in the Senate. You serve on 2 committees a day. My morning committee is Health and Welfare, which, was action central on COVID. And also I serve with Alice on Appropriations, which is one of the things we had to do is figure out what to do with over $1 billion, $1.12 billion of federal money, which was earmarked specifically for COVID-related expenses, and then figuring out how to run the state as well with a loss of revenue, which was not so bad for this fiscal year, but going into the next fiscal year, which we'll be setting up the budget for starting in January, we're looking at a really significant shortfall because of COVID, and that'll finally catch up with us. So the 3 of us are running for re-election. It is an election year, and we hope to bring our experience to this very challenging time.
We initially began to work enabling the state to function. We allowed for remote meetings and remote voting. We extended license renewals of all varieties. We stayed evictions and foreclosures. I mean, there was a huge amount of work that none of us, I think, fully appreciated had to be done in order to help our lives function in an everyday kind of capacity. We also, almost immediately, it was astonishing how quickly the state was able to house 2,000 homeless Vermonters because there were no visitors, and most motels and hotels had been shut. We fed and serviced over 2,000 Vermonters, and what is astonishing is that not one of them got COVID. Unlike Boston, for example, which has a huge homeless population, 1/3 of Boston's homeless got COVID. We also expanded telehealth and deferred tax payments. There was just a lot of many, many things that we did together in all our committees to enable everyday life. We expanded also the eligibility for unemployment insurance and for workers' compensation so that people dealing with COVID challenges, whether it was taking care of kids and assuming child care or caregiving or your personal vulnerabilities with your own health, so that you could benefit with those 2 programs. And as Dick has already said, we managed to appropriate over $1 billion in economic assistance, with everything from hazard pay to grants to businesses to education to healthcare. So it was huge. In my area in economic, as vice chair of Senate Economic Development, we spent a huge amount of time working on the granting programs and appropriated over $330 million in a variety of programs, ranging from direct grants to all sorts of businesses, a whole range of businesses, for technical assistance. And we added $100 additionally now that the pandemic unemployment assistance program has ended. We've added another $100 a week for people who are on unemployment, which is a state contribution to not only businesses but to people. So we wanted to make sure that individuals benefited as much as businesses were benefiting with all these grants. And we also, just the last piece in Senate Economic Development is also housing, and we invested in that $1.25 billion. We invested over $87 million in housing, which is just terrific. It's a huge infusion that we're going to be able to make in both increasing affordable housing, but also improving congregant living in homeless shelters, so that people who are living in those circumstances for the winter will be much safer and healthier. We also provide a huge amount for rental assistance and mortgage foreclosure prevention. And we, of course, have invested in the rental rehab program, which is to take vacant and blighted properties and bring them back online as productive units.
And while you're on housing, there's a piece, people said, well, yes, people aren't able to pay their rent, and that was true. So there was the programs, as Alison said, that would help the tenant of a house. And also there's money in the new money that came from COVID to help landlords who aren't receiving the rent, because
Right.
that's, of course, a major problem as well. If they don't have income coming in, how do they pay? Not the rent, their mortgage, excuse me. So that was another issue. One of the issues that the COVID money helped take care of was, because we had that coming in, we were able to pay for some things that way rather than through the general fund, which is strictly state money. So one of the things that helped out so that we were able to do some things with just state money, because the COVID money had been used for another need, was people have been asking a lot about body cameras, and the state police and mental health and people put with the state police. So in the budget there is money for body cameras for the state police. They already have car cameras. And also there's, we've set up a program whereby there will be a mental health social worker embedded with the state police barracks. There are 2 barracks already that have the mental health social worker with them, and that program has worked very well in terms of intervening with persons who are dealing with mental health problems. And the police shouldn't be expected to know everything about how to de-escalate a person who has some mental health issues occurring. So this has worked very well, and so that money is there for those workers to be placed in the barracks with the police so they can be called on quickly. So there's also the police use of force, which there was a bill, 2 bills with regard to that, with not being able to use a knee on someone's neck, but at the same time for police to also be able to defend themselves, not be killed themselves. So that's a complicated bill. Both are, but you could take a look at it. The governor let one of them go through without his signature, and there's much more work to be done on that. So I turn it over to you, Dick.
Yeah, it's, we started out discussing COVID and our response to that. Now, there are other issues, as Alice has just mentioned, that we need to get to, because life goes on, and all the old issues are still here, and new issues keep showing up. But I do want to say something else about COVID, and that is, I differ with our governor on a lot of issues: family leave, minimum wage. I have already voted for David Zuckerman for governor, but I want to give credit where it's due. I think that Governor Scott rose to the occasion when the COVID issue presented itself. I think he is a model, and how he responded was a model of how it ought to be done. And I am very proud of the democratically and progressively controlled legislature, that we did not deviate from the governor on a partisan basis on this, that we all pull together on this. This is an overarching issue, and it required cooperation, and we did that. As far as responding right now to the, and I think we've had good results because of that. On money, on what to do about the financial crunch being caused by this. In the 1930s, Franklin Roosevelt responded to the Great Depression with what is called the 3 R's. And it's 3 approaches, and it's in order of time. And that is to say relief, recovery, reform. The first thing you have to do is just take care of first things first. Then you want to actually bring the situation back up. And then you want to examine what fundamentally went wrong that we could perhaps change and not have it happen again. As far as relief, it's really quite simple. People, businesses need cash. It's as simple as that. And people who have lost their jobs and are out of money. And besides writing laws and passing tax bills and so on, we all do what we call constituent work, which is the phone rings, it's a constituent having a problem, and we try to help them. We've been doing a lot of trying to help people get the money they need and are legally entitled to. And there's been some inefficiency, which gets us to which will come up on the reform end. We have had, since March, a lessons learned project to keep notes on, okay, what have you learned from all this? And one of the things is that our state computers and some agencies are very obsolete and need to be addressed. And recovery is probably not going to be overnight, but I have great confidence that we will at least get by, and that ultimately we'll get back. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think our top priority has been to help the sectors that have been so badly damaged, particularly in our neck of the woods, the hospitality sector. But I think through all of these investments, while we're never going to make anybody whole, we are hopefully going to help people survive through the pandemic and get us out the other side, so that while our economy has taken a huge hit, it won't be as devastated and won't have permanent damage. We have done a huge amount in all sorts of other arenas. We have passed an increase in the minimum wage. When we talk about affordability, there are two sides to that affordability coin: what it costs us and what we're earning. It's all going to feel like it costs more if we're not earning enough. And Vermont underpays uniformly about 20% in every sector. And I think so. One of our objectives is to really try and develop our workforce so that our workforce is working in higher paid specialty areas. The McClure Foundation and the Vermont Department of Labor have just come out with a very exciting program that's going to be really focusing on high-paying, high-tech sector jobs that will benefit Vermonters, and will be driving our workforce development in those areas and promoting and marketing them and trying to get our young people into them. But workforce development is one area we just continue to work on. But we also overrode the Global Warming Solutions Act veto of the governor's. You know, climate change is just one of the most important issues Vermont needs to deal with. It is not, so many of our iconic industries are completely dependent on the climate not changing, whether it's skiing or tourism or agriculture, sugaring. You know, these are industries, all of which our forest products industry. All of these industries are totally dependent on our climate staying and sort of as it is now. It's already warmed up considerably. We've just had the driest summer on record for many, many years. We've had two of the warmest summers on record. And for us to keep Vermont as we want it and to keep the businesses we care about, it's really, we have to invest and put our money where our mouth is in terms of climate change. Also, it provides huge opportunities in the renewable energy sector for green jobs, and everything from weatherizing people's homes to installing new types of heating. It is a great growth opportunity with appropriately sited wind, hydro, and of course solar. These are huge economic opportunities for Vermont, and we can continue to lead the way on that if we choose to, and if we continue to invest in that area.
So another area just want to address, because this was on many people's minds, was the issue of the state colleges being able to continue. That is the former Johnson and Linden and, of course, Vermont Tech. And we were able to put in $30 million to help them through that crisis, and on top of the $50 million that's their normal appropriation. And we also put in $3 million for some job training programs. We also hired a person to help work with the boards to figure out what is in the future. They're certainly fine for this year, but there is a worry that some changes will have to take place because it's not sustainable the way it is. So that's in there. And also for our primary and secondary education, there was a lot of money put in to help the schools who need it desperately. And of course, many students are still at home and learning over the internet, which has been very complicated for many students in terms of their internet power not being very strong, with perhaps a parent working at home, and also things breaking down, kids not understanding everything. And also now many students are in classes whereby the teacher is in the classroom. I did get an email from my daughter, said her school has just gone back. She has 10 children online and 10 children in the classroom. That's a big classroom anyway, with 20 students, and half online, and she's looking at the screen, and just to be very aware of the safety things in the classroom. So anyway, it's hard for teachers, very hard for teachers, and everybody's working hard on that. The school boards have been working very hard on that, but that's an issue going on.
I will say about our state colleges that having state colleges is part of any civilized state. I mean, just passing the civilization on is important, but also on a less lofty way of looking at it is that the state colleges are often the only way that some young students can afford to go to college if they can't afford to pay room and board as well as tuition by going to an out-of-state college. That these are the commuter colleges for Vermont kids, and in many cases that they're going to have that or they're not going to have anything. And the other thing is that these colleges are essential to the local economy. I live in Bethel, which is a Windsor County town. VTC is in Randolph, which is Orange County, but it is a major economic foundation for the whole region, which dips well into Windsor County. And similarly, the Northern Vermont University, the Johnson campus. Johnson needs that for jobs. It needs it for just influx of money into the restaurants and, frankly, the bars, but also just the local economy. And Linden, so my son is a Linden graduate, and going up there, you can see that Linden College, now the Linden campus of University of Northern Vermont, is a major part of that regional economy. Down into St. Johnsbury, they need it.
And just a quick note, we did put in a lot more money for financial aid for students into the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, given that many people were laid off, didn't have the money that they had before. So that's in there to help students now, more money available for financial aid. So if you didn't qualify before, you might now.
Right. Well, and there is also additional money for our municipalities, $29 million for improving connectivity. All the CARES money has to be spent by December 30th. That was one of our challenges, is that we had to be able to choose and invest in projects that could be actually accomplished. So that's
by the end of the year.
By the end of this year. We put in vast amounts of money into healthcare and human services, and of course into agriculture.
The topic of race, I think we talk a lot lately about systemic racism, and that means aspects of our system that have racist implications. And I think it's important to clarify on what that means, because most people think, in particular white people, think of racism as having to do with negative emotions, hatred or dislike of this or that racial group, and racist stereotypes. Irish people all drink too much. Black people don't work as hard as white people, and so on. And there are people who can look at themselves, examine themselves, and say, I do not have negative racial attitudes, and I do not subscribe to racial stereotypes, racial superstitions. I don't have a racist bone in my body. I don't care if you're white, black, or purple. People are people to me. And it's a very happy self-congratulation. But it totally ignores the fact that systemic racism has nothing to do with white people's emotions or white people's opinions. Systemic racism has to do with the system working one way for white people and working a less desirable way for people of color. And by any statistic, starting with prenatal care, early births and low birth weight, right through life, all sorts of health outcomes, economic outcomes, educational outcomes, right through to life expectancy. People of color, as a group, function at a less enviable world than white people. And of course, one can always say, well, I'm white and I don't feel very privileged. I've had all sorts of bad luck. And as Susanna Davis, our racial equity expert for the state, says, of course white people suffer, but you don't suffer because you're white. And that's what we have to get our minds around, and that's what we have to deal with. And it is very disturbing to me when I hear if I have a problem with the slogan Black Lives Matter, is that it's restating the obvious. But there are people who get angry at that, and they say, what do you mean Black Lives Matter? All lives matter. Well, of course all lives matter. All would include black. If all lives matter, then that includes black lives. And our nation has historically acted as though black lives don't matter, or don't matter as much. And that continues to this day. And so it is a moment of reckoning for our nation, and that includes for Vermonters. We're the whitest state in the Union. We were the first state in the Union. In fact, before we were a state, the first constitution in North America to outlaw slavery, done in a somewhat awkward way, but it was the first to outlaw slavery. We like to think that we're the good guys, but the people of color among us have all sorts of stories that would indicate otherwise, and we owe it to them, and we owe it to ourselves, to our own consciences, to take a good, hard look at ourselves.
And to that end, Vermont has invested a couple of years ago in creating an office of racial equity, and we now have a racial equity director. And boy, Susanna Davis is here for the right moment. We've now given her a few more resources. We need to really, again, put our money where our mouth is and finance that office more fully so that she could do her job, because she's desired on every board imaginable and on every panel. I would just like to turn back. So we're working. Vermont is trying to right centuries of wrongs, and we've begun investing in all sorts of ways through our economy, through our education, through our criminal justice system. On economic development, in this COVID moment, we really have a dual challenge with economic development. Short term, we obviously need to focus on supporting our businesses, help them survive and recover. Long term, though, we need to continue to focus on building a competitive 21st century economy. We need to continue to invest in innovation, workforce development, and revitalizing our historic downtown and village centers. Windsor County is so well positioned for this. We have ample internet, and we have incredible architectural treasures in our downtowns. So our architectural infrastructure can accommodate the growth that we're talking about. Springfield's Black River Innovation Campus project illustrates how Vermont can create jobs for the future and use its repurposed downtown historic buildings. I'm really looking forward to continuing this work, particularly as we look at reforming Act 250 and looking at how we might streamline our Act 250 work in our downtowns to promote smart growth and to focus development not in the backcountry, which we want to keep as unparcelized as possible. We really want to focus our growth and development in our downtowns and village centers.
So just another piece on Act 250. It wasn't, what passed in the end really wasn't what was hoped for when the Act 250 Commission was put in place to see where it could be modernized and meet needs that are now have changed in the 50 years since it was enacted. But one of the things that many people had been asking about was the trail network around the state with regard to the snowmobiles, with regard to other trails. And so the governor, when he vetoed that bill, he did write an executive order addressing the trails situation, which people could take a look at that. It was just issued this month, and you might want to look at it. And he also said, the work needed to continue on Act 250 to modernize it and save parts that are very important. So that is going on. Another thing I wanted to mention was with regard to corrections and justice reinvestment. We've been working on justice reinvestment for quite a while. We now have a federal Council of State Governments grant for 2 years to continue that, and that is to work to get more people safely out of prison and receiving services in the community. If they don't have services in the community, they're rolling right back into prison. So that's a big part of it, and that's been being worked on. A lot of prisoners were let out during COVID to keep the numbers down, and people are saying, well, we want all the prisoners home. Well, we just signed a contract again for them to be out of state for another year, simply because we don't have the physical space here, and there have to be a large number of beds kept available if there's an outbreak in one of the prisons. The other thing is the courts. Many people are concerned about the slowness of the courts. Of course, they've been closed. They haven't been doing jury trials. They're getting ready to do the first one in December in Windham County. And that's been a big concern for many people because you're entitled to a speedy trial. Now, you might get it forgiven. The prosecutor might have that forgiven because of the pandemic, but it's about time they got going. And so that's what's happening there.
I'd just like to say, I think that one of the things we're going to be working on is lessons learned from COVID.
Yeah.
What many of the bills, I think, in the next legislative session are going to be about not reinventing the wheel. Each committee is going to have contributions to make to how we can improve things going forward, so that we'll have emergency measures in place the next time there's an emergency, that there'll be a continuity of government. We won't have to reinvent the wheel. We'll be better planning around supply chains and food networks. I think one of the really challenging things has been to see how fine the line is between food security and food insecurity. There's high-speed internet, and I think every committee will have really valuable contributions to lessons learned bills that will be going forward. But I think also for 2021, I will hope we really re-tackle healthcare reform. We have not been, we really had to pivot to a major healthcare crisis, but we really need to continue our work, I think, on healthcare reform because cost and access continue to be a huge problem. And
I think we're about out of time.
Thank you very much for listening, and we hope to see you around our towns.
Yeah.
Please feel free to call us or contact us.
Dick McCormack, Alice Nitka, Alison Clarkson.
Thank you very much. This was great.